Good evening. We call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Bristol, Virginia City Council today, Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Please join us for a moment of silence. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, well, I want to welcome everybody this evening. Thank you for coming out tonight. First item on our agenda is comments from the City Council.
I just have one. I'd just like to say congratulations to Leah Ross and the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. They represented Bristol in the Governor Youngkin's inaugural parade. And no matter which side of the fence you're on there, it's really exciting to see Bristol represented at such a big event, and to see them going across in front of the Capitol and to see it show up on the screen, Birthplace of Country Music Museum, Bristol, Virginia. I had a lot of it. I was very proud of them. So I just wanted to let you know that happened, and if you missed it, you can go on YouTube and watch it.
Yes, that was great. So, City Manager comments.
No comments tonight.
Okay. Next is matters to be presented by members of the public for non-agenda items. And these are items that are not on the agenda. The first person that signed up is Dr. Perigin.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, I just wanted to come by and say thank you for the support that you showed 2 weeks ago when we discussed school financing. It looks like we're getting closer than we've ever been before to making this a reality for our students and our community. Also, I'm very excited to see that this agenda item is on the IDA's docket for tomorrow to consider school financing through the IDA. Have no idea how that vote will go, but it's exciting to see that if either we're going to move in that direction or we know what direction we need to move as far as school financing goes. I just want to also just remind you that a couple weeks ago when we were discussing that, we talked to the folks from J.A. Street about the timeline for finishing and or starting this project and getting it finished by August of 2023. And they said we really need to start moving in days and not weeks, and we're 2 weeks in, and just want to draw to your attention that this postponement could cause some delays in meeting that deadline in August. And hopefully we can move forward and start to tick those check boxes off and make this a reality for our students. But there is that possibility that we could be really pushing that deadline in August. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Perigin. That's the last person that signed up for non-agenda items. Next, we're looking for a motion to adopt our agenda.
I'd like to make a motion for the adoption of the agenda with the following changes. That we postpone items 5 and 6 until our next meeting, and that we add a closed session for the following reasons: discussion of unannounced business prospect and legal matters.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Osborne, a second from Mr. Wingard. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley.
Yes.
Nave.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Farnham.
Yes. All right, the first item on the agenda of our regular agenda is landfill update, and we have a few folks that signed up for public comment for this item. The first person is Mr. Knupp. And as you're coming up, I'll just remind everyone who speaks with public comment this evening that the way the procedure goes, when you come up, everyone has 3 minutes to speak. The green light will come on when you begin speaking. The yellow light will come on when your time is about up, and when the red light comes on, it means your time is finished. So we ask you to state your name and your address into the microphone for the record, and to be courteous of your time and each other's. Thank you.
You ready?
Yes.
Chris Knupp, 2382 Shakespeare Road, here in Bristol, Virginia. I wasn't here last time. I wanted to thank each and every one of you for finally recognizing we've got a serious problem. which you guys know we had a serious problem before, and I know that it's legal process is going through, but finally, maybe we've got something going in the right direction. I hope so. All I ask is please, please, please don't let up off this crap. And I know we've got a lot of stuff going on here in our city, different things. Mr. Purgeon back here with the school system. I got a daughter-in-law, she's a teacher for Bristol, Virginia school system. We need that. But this landfill situation is our top priority. It has to be. I've been out of town working a little bit. Guys, ladies, Randy, I come in last night, and I know smoking's no good for you, and it was the other night too. But that's a bad habit I got. I'm kind of glad that's the only bad habit I have now. I growed up in the 70s. I had a lot of them. But anyways, I couldn't even enjoy it. Couldn't sleep. And guys, ladies, it's hard to make without sleep. This is just sickening. All I ask, and I'm asking for everybody here, back here on the Virginia and the Tennessee side, please, please, don't let up off of this. Whatever we need to do. We're starting to get systems coming in. Use everything that we got, man. I don't know what else to say on it. I'm old school. I could flip plumb out, but I'm not going to. That don't do no good. Make you feel bad. Then you have that on your conscience. All I'm asking you, Randy, you said you didn't have no comments a minute ago. I like to hear some of the stuff that's going on. And I know you can share some. I know you can't share it all, but.
Just for the record, I only said no comments to the media. I have
Okay,
no
okay,
comments.
I'll take that back then. I appreciate that. But all I ask, guys, ladies, please keep hammering on this. Like I said, I know we got other stuff to take care of here in the city of Bristol, Virginia, but you got the Tennessee residents too. And it's just as bad over there, man. You can go over that way. Have you ever heard of saying gaggot maggot on a gut wagon? That's bad. But we got a great city, man. I've lived here almost all my life, since I was 11 years old. We got a great city, and we can turn this back into a great city. But we need a lot of work to do it, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. The next person that signed up is Mr. Kellogg.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Just winging it here like I usually do. So, here tonight for two things. One, you know, there is definitely a lack of trust as far as what's happening at this landfill. I would like y'all to consider maybe some more pertinent and frequent updates for the landfill, work that's, you know, coming up, work that's happening. Maybe a little more, just a little more information for the residents of this city. I think that would be very helpful. Right now, it's kind of, you know, we got to kind of dig to get any information. So, and when you have to do that, that can lead to misinformation. So if you would consider that, I think that would be very helpful for the residents of both cities. Secondly, I want to again reiterate the need for some type of assistance for residents. You know, collectively as in the private sector through donations, some very generous ones, we have distributed almost 1,000 air purifiers to residents on both sides, Tennessee and Virginia. It's just a drop in the bucket. That doesn't count what, you know, Bristol, Tennessee's program through the United Way has done. So I'd ask you to please reconsider that. Now, they don't solve the problem, but they make it somewhat tolerable for a lot of people, and it makes a huge impact in their life. So, you know, when we have a night like we had last night, one or two of those small units in a home make a huge difference for our residents. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. The next person that signed up is Craig Widener.
Craig Widener, 26.5 6th Street, Bristol, Tennessee. I grew up in Bristol, Virginia, moved away, came back. Woke up to the smell of the landfill this morning. Didn't enjoy that, nor does anyone here enjoy that. I think it's sometimes lost on the folks who get up here and speak that you all live here. You smell it just like we do. One of the things that I would like to address is there's a couple different camps here on who's supporting what as regards to the landfill. I'm a part of a group with Rachel Mays, the Bristol Landfill, Virginia, Tennessee Info and Update. Rachel Mays is a chemist. She works with chemicals. She knows about these things. She's put lots of good information out there. And one of the things that I've found is they've asked Mr. Eads to put more info out there. Every time he does, those people are discredited. The people that were going to be brought here to help the city of Bristol, Tennessee stance on suing the city of Bristol, lo and behold, we have an odor problem. We don't have a toxicity problem. Those people are immediately dismissed. So when I see other groups commenting, I want to do a little research on my own, so I did. Here's what I found. You all have approved almost $3 million to go to this landfill to try to fix a problem. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Is that enough? We don't know. We'll see. But thank you for addressing that and approving those funds. The new wells, you hear that they failed. They haven't failed. They're actually running between 30 and 50% capacity. Mr. Eads has made it very clear, as the folks that are the experts here have said, we're going to have to get a lot higher up on that to dispel the odor that's being emitted from the landfill. So have we had enough time to see if that's worked? No, we haven't. But I hear from other groups, oh, you're trying to kill us. You don't care about us. All these different things. The research I've done on my own, you've done everything that DEQ and the EPA has asked you to do. Government runs slow. This isn't business. We understand that, or I understand that. So thank you for everything you're doing. A lot of times what you do gets misconstrued in the media and the public, but thank you for what you're doing. We know that you're working hard on this problem. We know that you smell it too. You don't like it any more than we do, so thank you for that. The last thing I would encourage you to do is there's some folks out there who like to discredit people, make allegations that they have no basis for making them, in that folks are stealing funds, follow the money. I hear that one a lot. The people who discredit you and the people who run you through the mud, I hope you take legal action against them because they deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Widener. The next person that signed up for public comment is Mr. Jay Urena. Am I saying that right?
That's close enough.
Okay.
Urena.
Urena. Okay.
So this is the first time I've been here. I haven't met any of y'all except an assistant manager today. So last night in my home, I could smell a light smell of an odor, and it turned out to be that toxic smell because I went outside my house. I live at 676 Suffolk Avenue. I've been a resident here for about 4 years. I started smelling that smell about 1.5 years ago. And I trusted you all to do something about it. I trust politicians and government. Unfortunately, yeah, I do, but and it turns out to be the worst thing you can do is to trust that you all, people in office will take care and do the jobs they're supposed to do. And the smell at my house, I couldn't use my yard. I couldn't be out in the yard all summer. I say all summer. Anytime I wanted to be outside, I couldn't be outside because of the toxicity of the stuff. I mean, you could stand outside for a few minutes. So why didn't the city back then tell the EPA to go up there to people's property and take measurements. You know, I watched some of your videos and they were just terrible. Listen to that EPA woman up there for about a minute, talk about the measurements they made out at the landfill, but I didn't hear anybody say that you all were doing something out at actually going out to people's property out here to check it out. So I don't know if that was occurring or not, but it's something that you could do now to get a better measurement and get a better idea of what's going on. I just wanted to say, you know, it's disappointing to come to a town and to have all these, quite a few issues arise, you know, after I'd already bought my property up here. And this to be such an egregious thing going on with the landfill. So I thought I'd come down and just say that, you know, last night I'm in my house and I smelled the smell for the first time. I've got it nice and tight house because it's just been recently remodeled. So it's an older home, but it's pretty tight. And that set me off pretty good as far as wanting to do something and try and put a word in here with other folks that are complaining about it. Yellow light. I hope you all don't let up, you know, like the other man says. And info and updates would be better because I didn't know anything about what's going on. I have to go online to look up and find out what's going on. I got my little phone to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to find a computer somewhere and go online to look it up. And I can't believe you haven't given any assistance to people like with air filters and things like that. If that's what's going on, I cannot believe that. It's hard to believe. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last person that signed up for public comment for this item. Staff report.
Council, members of the public, Mr. Knupp specifically, we're not letting up. My goal is to correct this issue as quickly as we possibly can, and that's council's goal as well. We all recognize this has not gone as quickly as any of us would like for it to go, and I've said on numerous occasions before, if I had a switch to flip, I would have switched it off a long time ago. Unfortunately, I don't have that switch. So we are in the process right now. Our engineers are designing a 24-month project and cost estimate plan so we can start budgeting for the next fiscal year as to how to address the issues associated with the landfill that's impacting our community. We anticipate having that finalized within the next couple of weeks so we can start that budget process for the new fiscal year beginning on July 1. We are in the process of a gas well expansion design. I know some people may not want to hear that, but all the experts have advised us potentially that we may need to add more gas wells, and so we are in the process of designing that system as we speak. Previously, council approved funds for the scoping of the north end, what we call the north end clean out. They have scoped the north end clean out. For the most part, it looks in decent shape. They were going to scope the south end clean out tomorrow, but due to temperature, they are going to postpone that for a few days until the temperature warms up. You've heard us talk about chimneys and remediating the chimneys where we know we have known gases escaping. That remediation is partly complete at this point. We hope to have it complete by the end of the week. We are currently pulling about 700 to 800 cubic feet per minute of gas, and we're operating the wells at 30 to 50% depending on where the wells are. Previously, we had pulled the two 100 horsepower motors from the wet wells and replaced those. Today they pulled out the 30 horsepower motor, and the two 100 horsepower motors are running the wet well at the moment. The 30 horsepower will be replaced here in the next few weeks. Tentatively, we have Craig Benson scheduled to speak to council via Zoom on February the 8th, and he'll give an update on his assessment of the landfill as well. So those are the updates in regards to what has been going on at the landfill recently. There was a comment previously. There is a website for individuals to get information about the landfill. At this point, putting out information on that website I can put this information out tonight. It's just a slow process, and there's some days that we just don't have an update that is, that we can put out. But we will put that out. I also, someone mentioned, well, that's all the comments I have.
Thank you, Mr. Eads. You want,
Add a comment to just asking you a question, I know the answer. But when you put the information on the website, there is a little box there that you can check to get notifications. So it's not something that you have to check, that you'll get an email saying, you know, this is what's been uploaded. So sometimes that's a little easier to stay up to date. I know that comment was made about how do we keep up to date. That would be my suggestion, is to actually check the box and subscribe.
Thank you, Mr. Hartley. The next item on our agenda is the update from Davenport and Company on bond refinancing.
Council, before you tonight is David Rose and Roland Cooch with Davenport and Company. Mr. Cooch was here 2 weeks ago to discuss potential refunding opportunities for some debt, for some bond refinance that from 2018, and potentially refinancing those bonds again for a lower interest rate. We know that there was some issues and concerns that council had, and they wanted to come back and address those issues again tonight to give you all more information so you can make a more informed decision.
Thank you, Mr. Eads. Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, I am pleased to be here tonight with my senior partner, David Rose, who you may remember on many occasions. We either both come together or both have come independently, but we've been working with the city for the past couple of decades easily in advising you on matters like this in terms of refinancing opportunities. One thing I'd like to point out, and again, just as a reminder, based on the market today, we're here with this refinancing opportunity by in part because of a couple of factors. One, when we originally helped the city enter into or term out and enter into the 2018 bonds, which we're looking at today as a potential refunding opportunity, we intentionally positioned that with a shorter than normal call period so we could take advantage of interest rates as they may provide these refunding opportunities. Number two, over the course of the past couple of years, specifically most recently, the city of Bristol, because of its improvement in structural balance, in budgeting, in fund balance, really has strengthened its credit ratings quite a bit since we've looked at the information back in 2018 and even prior. The ratings have come up to the current status of where they are today. That's an A3 by Moody's and an A+ by Standard & Poor's. With that, I'd like to just give you an update with respect to what we presented last time. Some of this information you'll see is similar in format, but we've updated the numbers based on current market conditions. And we've also, at the end, my colleague David will talk about the impact on the legal debt margin projected going forward, because that was a comment we heard last time and wanted to bring back some more data points for you to take a look at as you think about undertaking potentially this refinancing opportunity. With respect to this, just as a background, just to say we have, over the course of the past several years and most recently in 2020, assisted the city with some similar refinancing opportunities wherein it saved about $3.5 million over the course of the debt at that point. Today, we stand here and looking at the potential refinancing opportunity of the 2018 GO bonds. Again, we're looking at about $68.5 million of refunding candidates, on average at about 4.1% of interest. The refunding, because of the nature of the way refundings work in taxable municipal bonds, the refunding is going to cause the issue to be about $76 million or thereabouts. It's a slight increase in the total debt outstanding. We'll get into later how that impacts the projected legal debt margin. But in looking at this transaction, it's generating about 3.8, almost upwards of $4 million in total savings over the life of the transaction. That's budgetary savings, cash flow over the life of the transaction. The debt is not extended. In fact, some of that debt is kind of reshifted and paid off a little bit sooner and kind of compensates for the additional debt that's being issued there.
Just a brief look at interest rate environment, where we are today. Just as a reminder, if you look at the historic trends over the past, bear with me here, since 2000, you could see the interest rates declining. We're at and just beyond the near historic lows of near all-time, 60-year all-time historic lows. And you can see that little circle shows where we're kind of moving back upwards a little bit. So rates are moving a little bit. We could see we're still in a mode where we could save about almost that $4 million mark that we're talking about. What does that mean in terms of the actual cash flow? There's a lot of details on this page, but we wanted to make sure we presented you with the details. The bonds that we're funding on the left-hand side of the page are at the top. And again, we did talk about the amount that we're funding, replacing it with refunding bonds that are issued at a lower cost of funds, a lower interest rate. What that translates into is direct cash flow and savings that really go straight to the bottom line, and the ability to program that towards other needs, albeit, whether it's other governmental needs that may come up, but it really gives you that flexibility or additional flexibility that's not going towards debt service, but would be allowed to be rededicated towards some other item of expenditure. That is about almost $200,000 a year at this point. So it's very meaningful dollars, and that's how we get to almost the $4 million mark at that level. So with that, I'd like to go in and turn it over to my colleague David Rose. He's going to talk to you a little bit about a perspective in the legal debt margin and where we're anticipating it to go from there. Okay.
Thank you, Roland. Mr. Mayor, members of council, pleasure to be here again. The legal debt margin, what you can see here, it's a little small, I apologize, but if you go back to 2014, 2015, that time frame, on the far right-hand side, you could see what our legal debt margin was. And that's when the city was really at its bottom. Okay, thank you. And you could see there, we hit the low point in 2016. Our ratings were not as good. We had very little fund balances, if any. And as a result of all that, the growth, while it averaged about 2% a year, was really flat, if you would, for several years. And as a result, our legal debt margin was down at $3.7 million, effectively no debt margin at all. That said, as the city has seen a rebound, as things have improved in assessed value, today, at the end of fiscal year 21, which was back in June, we were basically 6 times at that level, some almost $20 million of legal debt margin at the end of 21. Okay? So let's see if we can go to the next page here. All righty. I may want to make that a little bit larger if we could. Okay, that's great. Just, okay. So let me make sure I've got the right page. Is that with the refunding? I think it is. Okay, good. So if indeed we go forward on the refunding, and by the way, as Roland was talking about, the interest rates that we have right now average 4.1%, which is a solid rate. We are talking about a fixed interest rate, not extending the debt, below 3%. That's the number we're talking about. Basically, an interest rate all in of about 2.8%. So that would be a record low for the city in terms of interest rates. That said, though, even with what Roland was talking about, in the end of 22, we would dip down to about 14.5 million. But by fiscal year 23, effectively a year from now, because we're in the fiscal year 22 right now, we would be above $20 million. And that does not factor in what we think will be a very nice jump when it comes to the casino project. That does not factor that in. It also assumes that while the history of the last several years has been 2% assessed value growth, we treat it as if you grow at 1%. So that column there that says value cut off a little bit that starts at 1.2 billion. We've acted as if that only grows at 1%, which would be very disappointing. But the point here is, if you look at the far right-hand side, knowing that in 2014, we were at some 3.7 million, we estimate at 2024 to be at almost, if not more than 26 million of debt capacity. So our focus here and our thoughts for you is this. If indeed we have a significant need as it relates to the landfill, we have no sense of that right now, but if indeed we have to do something significant, if we had to make it a general obligation, we're looking at having some 20 to 25 million of capacity. On top of that, I don't believe we have to make it a general obligation to do something for the landfill. If we have to do it at that kind of level, we could make it what we've called, in effect, a lease arrangement. And that would be an interest rate very close to where we are today. So from that perspective, the reason that debt margin jumps so quickly on the far right-hand side is because we are paying our debts down faster going forward than we have been. That's part of the structure that we all put in place when we did the 2018 issue. And also, if we do the refunding, we're paying this debt down quicker. So with all that said, you can see where the debt margin would be if indeed we only have 1% year-over-year growth, which would of course be lower than we've had historically, and on top of that would not factor in any of the casino impact that we expect. But again, I'm not an expert on what those numbers would be. So lastly, if we are fortunate to get the go-ahead on this, we assume that we would be back either on February 8th, or if necessary, it could be as late as February 22nd at the second meeting in February, assuming y'all still have that meeting, to approve documents formally. We would be talking with the rating agencies in the middle part of February with both this discussion as well as with the school project. So we'll be able to do that together at the same time. We expect ratings by the end of February. And so we are really talking about, in both instances, and with the hope of the IDA tomorrow, I'll be there, try to answer any questions. We've given them some additional information. But the focus here would be that we would look to lock in these interest rates come early March. And if we can do that, hopefully we could be as close to possible where these interest rates are. Because, as you know, the Federal Reserve is talking about raising the rates 4 times this year. And we're trying to beat, if you would, those rates that they're trying to increase. I think that's part of why we've seen so much volatility, specifically in the stock market yesterday. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Roland and I would do, Mr. Mayor, members of council. But I'll tell you this, if you think about that landfill, I don't know what it's going to cost, but if we can save close to $200,000 a year, all that's going to do is make the cash flows for the general government and the general fund better if we indeed have to absorb some additional costs as it relates to landfill improvements or any other improvements for the city. So we think it's a win-win for the city. And again, you've made great strides with regard to your overall legal debt margin. And that's sort of where we are.
You go ahead.
All right, I've got quite a few questions. A couple I think you answered, I just want to clarify. So in one of the differences is the chart. I think last time you just showed the legal debt margin but didn't have any annual increase, and that is based on 1%?
Yes, sir.
Which is below the historic average.
You've averaged 2%
Okay.
over the last several years, and we've made it 1%, not because we think you'll be lower, but we just wanted to be more conservative.
Okay. And then you show there then the outstanding debt, and you mentioned in your presentation in that column, you say part of that, the reason the debt margin will decrease is because we're paying debt faster.
Will
Could you
increase,
show?
your debt margin will increase.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, but
Yes.
we're accelerating the payment. Could you provide us with a column that shows the current payments?
We
So-
can, we've got that. I'll tell you what.
It's not in this presentation.
Yeah, well, but, yeah, I mean, at some point, just to see how those compare. When you
Yeah.
say we're paying it faster, I mean, how much accelerated is it? So we can look apples to apples.
And I'll get, Mr. Hartley, you know what we could do though? Even though there's a 1% increase, even though we don't have it with us right now, if you were to take a look at, let's say 2023, and you see where it's 20 million, okay? And then the next year, thank you. And the next year it goes to almost 25.7 million. Most of that is not necessarily the growth of the 1%, but it's the fact that several millions of dollars of principal are being paid down. And we'll get you that information.
Yeah.
So we are paying several millions of dollars every year down. You are, I should say.
And I know that, of course, that's a good thing. I know the other opportunities you brought us the last few years have always been not to extend the term, but
Right.
to pay down, so I do appreciate that. Let's see, one of my next questions, I think in one of the notes here, you anticipated a March 17th closing date. And you mentioned, and I was just, I read in today's Bristol Courier, of course, the Fed, it's, you know, I mean, it's pretty certain they're gonna go up. You know, so my question there is, you know, with the timing, one, have you built that in? That they're, and I would assume that they're probably gonna go up in 25 basis point increments. That's how they step down, so I assume that's how they're gonna step back up.
That's a great question, Mr. Hartley. So two things. Number one, a lot of times what happens in our industry is anticipating that there's going to be a 25 basis point jump or thereabouts, if that's what they're talking about. The marketplace in the free markets actually starts to build that in
Yeah.
ahead of time. So there'll be, it's not inconceivable that, let's assume they do that on March 17th, let's say, if that's the date, if that's what the case. Interest rates on the public markets might go down a basis point or two or a few because it's already been built in.
Okay.
So what we're seeing right now is those rates are starting to rise, the far end. But what's also rising is the reinvestment rate. I know it's a little bit complex, but Roland talked about the call date. We've got a few years to the call date. Well, we set up this escrow. Well, that escrow has got to have a certain amount of interest rate to it. That's going up as well. So what's happening here is, for us, with you, it's not just the final interest rate that we borrow at. It's what we're able to reinvest the money for the next few years at. And while that's going up at the same time as the FAR rate, we're basically not seeing a deterioration, if you would, of the overall savings.
So,
It's complex.
and, yeah, and I understand that, and I guess to add to what I would like to see anyway, if possible, is, you know, what this would look like in maybe one or two 25-point
Yes.
increments, just to see, it's like, okay, if we miss this window, and the Fed, they've kind of indicated 3 to 4, so you figure you've got 2 or 3 months is the next window, just to see what, if we don't do this now, what the cost, if, say, 6 months from now, you decide to do this, does it even make sense, kind of thing, and kind of weigh that a little bit, because, as you point out with the landfill, there's a lot of balls up in the air right now that a little bit of time might help give us a little clarity, but yet, waiting too long could also make this not work.
So we will do that. So there's a couple other things to keep in mind. We put in there earlier, there was if we can go backward, if someone can go back to, if they could go back. Someone, keep going, if you could go back, if you would. Keep going. Okay, right there. All right, do you see on line 16, it says net present value savings,
Yes.
4.4%? In our industry, typically, any present value that's 3% or higher is considered a worthwhile bona fide refinancing. So if those interest rates that you're talking about cause the savings to go below 3%, we would not recommend moving
Yeah.
forward with the transaction. We would say, time out, let's monitor it, let's be, so to speak, shelf ready. So what we can also do, Mr. Hartley, is not only show you what happens if 25 basis points move, but what if we get to that minimum recommended savings? That
Okay.
doesn't mean you may want to go lower than that, but at least we, as your advisors, would say, you know what, let's live for another day. Let's hold off until we get above that 3% threshold. But we've basically been staying in that plus 4% range
Yeah.
for a while now.
Okay.
So that's what I would say.
You mentioned working with the IDA and on the school project and the credit. If the IDA is the route that goes, do you still have to go out to get the rating agencies?
Yes.
Is it, I know you mentioned it with the cops. I couldn't remember if
Yeah.
that, either one of those options, you
Either
still
one.
have to.
It does, from the rating agency standpoint, they don't care. They know either way, they need to be
As long as we
approached.
don't go with the completely private financing.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. But the point is, I think, and Roland could add to this, what we were able to show was if the IDA is willing to work with the city versus that private financing, the savings is north of $5 million. If not, and we do the certificates or participation, we chop that savings down by a couple $1 million. So we're really hoping that the IDA will work with the city and help you save the total, which would be another couple $1 million versus the private.
And then my last question, because this is going to come up a little later, the review of the financial policies. One of them is debt ratio policies. So this is making our absolute debt go up slightly. So will that make us, how will that impact those policies? And I
What's
think
going to do is,
it's-
so you've
it's
got
percentage
several
of debt
policies.
to assessed value is one, and the target's 5%. The other's percentage of debt at operating expenses, and that's 8%.
So, and I could get Ms. Spradlin, but I'll just say very quickly, what it's going to do, that 200,000 or thereabouts, it's whether it's 100,000 or 200,000 of savings, it's going to make that debt service to the operations that much better. So this only helps that policy. Then with the debt levels, as Roland said, for about a year, year and a half, that's going to go up slightly, but then that comes down as well. So either way, we think it's going to be a very good story to tell the rating agencies, if indeed we can move forward. It's going to be a good story. They're going to like it.
All right. Thank you. I know there's a lot of questions, but thank
No,
you.
it's fine.
Okay, I have some questions, and you're already on page 3 there. All right, help us, give us some more clarity on line item 3, par refund at 68 million, and then line item 9, par amount 76 million. That's almost an $8 million swing. Can you explain that a little better?
Sure. Mr. Wingard, that's a very good question. And when it comes to these types of refinancings, one thing that I mentioned very early on in the presentation was the call date of these bonds, the 2018 bonds. What that means is when the bonds were issued in 2018, there is a standard municipal bond feature where they cannot be prepaid until a certain point in time. With these 2018 bonds, that point in time is 2026. So essentially, in order to do this type of transaction, it's called an advance refunding. And that means that we're issuing bonds today that are going to be put into an escrow account, a bank account specially designed to hold those monies, plus the amount it takes to cover the interest till 2026. And of course, we get the benefit of investing those monies over time until that point in time in 2026, when that escrow extinguishes all the bonds we're refunding. What that means essentially is we have to fund the difference between what we're paying off of 68.4, and then that difference is essentially the interest, the net interest we have to cover, up to 76.3 million, and that is the increase in the bond size. What we will see is when we provide the follow-up for Mr. Hartley's question, is that we're not paying as much interest every year now. We're saving money on the interest expense. So that debt service on these bonds comes down by 200,000. But the benefit of paying less interest, even though we have a little more bonds here outstanding, is we get to push some of the bonds forward. So what happens is pretty much in year one, after this transaction's done, you start paying down the 76.3 million faster than you're paying down the 68.5. Because that 68.5, you'll see, is 2027 maturity through 2042. So when we issue these bonds now, in, let's say, 2022, we'll essentially be paying those bonds down within a year. We'll be paying meaningful amounts down within a year, so that helps bring that increased bond size down faster.
You know, the interesting thing, Ms. Wingard, I remember, I think at the time you were vice mayor, and you said if we get to a healthier situation, this was some maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I remember, you said we need to start paying debt down faster. That's exactly what this does. It increases the debt for the first few years, but then we're paying that down much quicker, and on top of that, we're paying it down at an interest rate of what will be hopefully below 3% versus right now, which is over 4%. So the net effect of all that is not only we're not extending the debt, we're paying it faster, we're paying the principal, and we're freeing up, if you would, our debt capacity after the first couple of years quicker than we would otherwise. So we know that the rating folks, who are really the final, they're independent, they don't care about us and all, they will be positive on this with their review. We believe that, we know that.
Okay. All right, the 7.8 million is paying interest up front that the bonds would lose by paying them off right now. So we got to prepay this interest to move forward with the refinance of the tune of $7.8 million. Okay, I needed clarity on that. Okay, and my next question is, on page 4, for 2021, you're showing us at $108 million still year to date in debt. And I thought we had paid off more debt than that. I did not realize we're sitting here today still owing $108 million. We still owe 108? I thought we owed 108 a few years ago.
Yes, sir, and part of that is we've refinanced and the principals have gone up, principal has gone up. We have paid down the debt. This total also includes the school debt, which you all are not used to. That's not included in our internal documents of a little over $1 million there, 1.1 million, because that's our GO debt, but that is actually internally reported on the school's books. So that's why that may look a little bit higher than what you're used to seeing.
So now we're mixing in other debt from what
Not
we're
mixing in,
accustomed
it's
to
general
seeing.
obligation debt. It is reported in our financial report just for what we talk about internally. That is carried on the school board's books, and they pay that 100%. So that's why it may just look a little bit different.
Okay. All right, and then that's the year 2021, and you've got the rate of growth at 1% annually. And I noticed that year 2022 is the same identical numbers, other than you get to your fiscal year end.
What we did, Mr. Wingard, to be especially conservative, we just kept it the very same. We acted as if there'd be no growth in 2022.
Okay. So this 113 million on page 5 for the year 2022 is you assuming we're going to do this 76 million increase?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. I would like to have seen this flow chart side by side to do a comparison if we done nothing and this flow chart.
We could do
I would
that.
like to see that.
We'll get you that with Mr. Hartley's information. We'll go through, obviously, the staff, but we'll get to that or whatever else people want, by all means.
Okay. All right, that's it for me.
All right. Well, I wanted to say thank you all for coming and explaining all of this and working on this. There's something that I like, and there's something that I guess I have a concern with. Well, I won't really say a concern with, but just a hesitation. Obviously I like the annual cash flow savings, which was roughly 190, almost 200,000, and that total was about 3.8 million over the life of our payments. So I like that a lot. I think it was 2015, 2016 when we were at our closest, the smallest legal
I
debt.
think it was 2014 on that, no, I take it back, 2016, you're right.
Okay.
2016, we're down to $3.7 million.
So at that time, when it was 3.7 of borrowing capacity, I don't think any of us up here were here yet. You were, right, just a little bit. And then, folks with city staff, a lot of them weren't here yet, but you guys have been here with the city. So you all saw over the course of some time we were going in the wrong direction as far as how much the ability we had to borrow, how much we owed. And then, since then it seems like we've been very conservative with borrowing money. I don't think we've really voted to borrow more money, maybe with the exception of the social services building, which we borrowed and paid off, I believe, pretty quickly. So it seems like we've been going in this direction for a few years where we've been paying the debt down, we've been building up our cash, our credit rating is looking good. So for me, I guess seeing that first number of the, I guess it was the next year where the actual total debt went up, it was like the 113. In a way for me, I think, is that I don't know, there's like a psychological part of it of increasing the amount, which I know overall in time there's savings. And I think, am I looking at too busy looking at a few trees, I'm not looking at the whole forest because the overall savings over time. So, but it's something we definitely need to discuss and figure out if we can, take care of it and realize those savings. So.
Again, it's our jobs to worry about the trees and the forest. And the point is, we know that when you look at the forest, this makes sense. Advanced refundings that Roland was talking about are the predominant typical refundings that local governments do. So when Roland was explaining an advanced refunding, we don't want to make that sound like that's an atypical type of refinancing. It's a very typical financing that's been done for decades in our industry. So the state does it, the local governments do it, in fact. So having said that, but the difference is, to Mr. Wingard, and your point as well, Mr. Mayor, is that most local governments are not close to their debt margin, certainly not where you were back in 2016, which essentially was no debt capacity, effectively. But the point here is, if we can get quickly to a point where we'll be at 20+ million, 25 million, by the time perhaps there's a need to do something, if there is, meaningful for the landfill, if there is, and I have no sense of that, you now have a much bigger platform to jump from, on top of the fact that we keep chopping down on the actual debt service, which again is one of Ms. Spradlin's critical, if not the most critical. Because really what we're talking about, the 200,000, I liken it when I explain to local governments or I explain to people, that's like your credit card. If we're going to take 200,000 out of your overall credit card annual payment, all we're doing is saying we're depressing purposely the amount of dollars that have to come out of that general fund to pay your mortgage. Credit card, same thing. So that's why I see the forest works. So we'll get all that information to you. I think we would hope to get some consensus tonight that we can talk with the rating agencies, that we are not wasting their time and all. I think we'd like to try to do that.
So you talk about
Because
talking
of
with,
rates, because of rates.
well, talking with the rating agencies, and you said you'd go ahead if the school financing leans that way, you may go ahead and do that anyway. So at what point then, so you're already going to start conversations with them, so would that give us a little extra time on our end to make up
Yeah.
this. I
Well,
mean,
again-
because you've already started that conversation.
Yes, sir. It would, it would,
Okay.
absolutely. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Hartley, even if you all said yes immediately, go with me, say you did, but I'm not asking you to. And then rates go away, and let's say we've already talked to the rating agencies, then they just understand it's on hold, and it's on hold indefinitely. Till we hit a certain, assuming y'all are good with a certain, going forward at some point, but the rates go away from us, then it's just going on hold. It just gets suspended.
Okay.
All right, I understand you're looking for some kind of consensus. And this is where we find ourselves. I cannot speak for the rest of them. I will speak for myself. It is obviously time to build a school. Council has already agreed to do it. Now they have to worry about and figure out how they're going to finance it. With what I'm seeing here, I would not be in favor of refinancing these bonds right now, because I have presented a proposal that is going to require this $19 million of debt that we have available right now to help pay and contribute to this school and keep these bonds in-house as normal should be. And if we was to move forward on this, it would take us down to a $14 million borrowing availability, which is not enough to borrow the money in-house to move forward with the school. So my consensus on my end, I'm not willing to move forward with this until we figure out what we're going to do with the school.
I know there was some talk about some information that you could provide us as far as a side-by-side comparison about a few things. When do you think that could come to us?
Just a couple days.
Okay.
Very quickly.
Okay.
Very quickly.
All right. Well, I definitely think we're in a spot where we can discuss more and look at the details, but I do understand everything you guys have presented, and I appreciate you all coming here to give us this information. So,
That's why we're here. So
Okay.
again, we'll get that information through to the staff. We can be here on the 8th, or one of us, as we typically back and forth, the 22nd as well. But again, as you said, Mr. Hartley, I think you're right. We are, one way or another, we're going to be talking to the rating agencies. So whether it's Mr. Wingard's proposal or something like, we need to talk to them anyway. It's but we'd like to try, when we do talk to them, in probably, again, the middle part of February. We haven't set it up yet. We'd like to have some sense of, there's some balls in the air, some things, and want to give them some sense of that. But I do think what I hear is that y'all have decided, I was not here, but I knew this, you want to go forward and support the schools. That's a given. So we really do have a reason to talk to them, and that's what we'll do.
okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Philip, very much. Thank you.
And if it's okay with everyone, before we move on to our next agenda item, we'll take a 5-minute recess. The next item of our agenda, request for a zoning map amendment, number 02-2021 Island Road. Nobody signed up for public comment for this item. So, staff report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, member of council. Staff has received a request from Steel Creek 237 for a zoning map amendment for its property located on Island Road. As you can see up there, so the location is at the corner of Island Road and Steel Creek Road. Property is approximately 12.5 acres, and it is currently vacant. The topography of the property is such that there's only a little bit of flat land here. There's a good section of floodplain, and then there's quite a bit of steep going uphill there toward the west and the south of the property. But there is a little bit of land that is eligible for development. The request that has been made is to rezone the property from R2, which is single and two-family residential, to R3, which is multifamily residential. The biggest differences really between the R2 and the R3. In an R2, you can only put a 2-unit building per lot, while in the R3, you can put multiple buildings on the same lot, so you can kind of cluster those buildings together a little bit more, which would make it more attractive for development, especially in an area that doesn't have a lot of land that can be developed. This is part of a multi-state, multi-jurisdictional project. And this was sent to me earlier today. This is a concept plan for the entire property in both Bristol, Tennessee and Bristol, Virginia. On the Tennessee side, there is some retail right as it fronts 11W West State Street. And there'll be a new street constructed, which will go through a residential neighborhood on the Tennessee side and a bit of residential on the Virginia side that would, and then would exit out Island Road. I have spoken to the developer. The proposal for the Virginia side, they estimate somewhere between 80 and 100 residential units on the Virginia side, along with a clubhouse and office for the rental agency. Just to give you a little bit of an update as far as the Bristol, Tennessee rezoning part of it goes, they went to Planning Commission last night and it has been approved to City Council. Their process is a little bit different. They would go to a first reading in February, a second reading in March, and then it would become effective around the 25th of March if everything were to be approved. For the Bristol, Virginia process, if everything were approved, it would be approved and become effective right around March 24th. So if this were to progress and the Tennessee side were to progress, they would be approved both roughly within days of each other. The applicant has followed all the legal processes and all the processes here in the city. As you know, there was a public hearing 2 weeks ago on this particular request. And then last week, on January 18th, at the regular Planning Commission meeting, they voted to recommend approval of the rezoning to City Council by a 6-0 vote. I just want to go into a few of the staff comments briefly. As far as consistency with the adopted city comprehensive plan, it does not specifically address this area of the city. However, Objective 5 of the Residential Area Framework Plan states that the city should encourage and support the development of diversity of new housing product at a variety of price points and sizes. The future land use map, which was revised in 2019, shows the subject property as single-family detached. However, as I mentioned earlier, because of the topography and because there's not a lot of developable land on this 12.5 acres, any development that cannot be clustered, say in an R3, would most likely not be desirable for a developer. As far as impacts, I took comments from staff. As far as local traffic goes, we did have a comment from our transportation planner, Melanie Fleener, who stated that on average, apartment uses generate approximately 6 trips per day, with half entering and half exiting. So you can just kind of look at that as what the traffic would be. You would anticipate that some of the traffic would go out onto the Tennessee side, some of it would go onto the Virginia side. It's not anticipated to be a problem on island roads. It's currently not a heavily traveled road. When we do get an official site plan showing the exact number of units, City Engineering Department can and might request a traffic study be done. As far as natural resources go, there are wetlands and there is quite a bit of floodplain on this property. So city staff will require that all environmental related permitting be obtained and approved prior to development, including soil and erosion control and stormwater management. Connection to public water and sewer will be required by Bristol, Virginia Utilities. As far as the school system goes, there will most likely be some impact. It just depends on how many people live on the Virginia side who have school-aged children. So at that point, we're not quite so sure. Should not have any impact on the local parks and recreation. We do have a comment on emergency services from Eric Blevins, our fire marshal. The development under either use group at this location would create an equal need for infrastructure development in this area. So the zoning change would be acceptable. Presently, the closest hydrant is near 645 Island Road with no hydrants on the Virginia section of Steel Creek Road. Water, wastewater, and electrical facilities. Philip King from Bristol, Virginia Utilities offered a comment. BVU has no wastewater services available to the property. Wastewater services will need to utilize the City of Bristol, Tennessee infrastructure. The developer should work with BVU and the City of Bristol, Tennessee to ensure that the property can be served. Public transit, there is currently no public transit to this area, so there should be no impact. As far as other governmental services, garbage collection services will be addressed during the site plan review process. No comments were offered from police. Neither the city engineer nor the building official had any official comments. Based on this information, staff recommends approval of the request for a zoning map amendment. And we do have a representative from the company here if there are any questions that I cannot answer or that you might want to answer them directly.
Thank you very much, Jay. And if there are any questions for Jay or for the developer, and we're also looking for a motion in a second as well.
I make a motion to approve the zoning amendment.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there council discussion?
If the developer wouldn't mind, I'd kind of like to hear that drawing got by email a little earlier before the meeting, but kind of hear their vision for this because it is a unique development with being in two states at once.
My name's Greg Elledge. I'm representing Steel Creek 237. They're a development company that is pretty well established in the area. They have, I think, 6 existing apartment complexes in the Sullivan County and Tri-City area. They're looking to build this one and also looking to buy some additional properties in the Washington County, Virginia area and Bristol, Virginia area. So just, an area they're looking to expand into. They specialize in multifamily housing. We try to provide, a diversified housing inventory with, workforce type housing along with housing for families and individuals who are traveling.
So would this be, you're looking at market rate?
I'm sorry.
Market rate rentals, is that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, I think they're gonna rent, that's what they're trying to do is get, competitive. There's a lot of new developments going on around and a lot of new apartment inventory out there. And some of theirs is a little bit more older and dated, so they're looking to try to, get in that market as well. So as far as what they're gonna rent for, if they have any kind of market value for it, I haven't discussed that with them.
I mean, what, in terms of inventory, what are you looking at in terms of like 1, 2, 3 bedroom kind of
These
mix or?
I think these are all going to be proposed between 1 and 3 bedroom complexes or units, and limited to 3 stories. And again, a lot of this is early concept stuff. We're just here for rezoning, so this is not a site plan. It's not.
No,
This is all just, you know, concept stuff. And like you pointed out, you know, I got it about a day before I sent it to Jay. So there's a lot of this stuff is just to try to give you guys an idea of what the overall concept is. And then, you know, one of the main things, you know, we don't anticipate connecting to Steel Creek Road. We also don't anticipate affecting the stream. Now, obviously, during engineering, some of those things can change, but and all that would have to go through, you know, all of the regular approval. But right now, that's basically, I think, the main thing they wanted to convey with that concept drawing there.
Well, and I appreciate it. I drove by there and was trying to, of course, the information we have shows like a little triangle of a bigger project, and trying to wrap my mind around how this exactly, you know, what you're trying to do with the entire project, not just the phase here, and how that helps a lot, that drawing.
My understanding is they anticipate doing this all in one phase. We're gonna, you know, get approval for an entire site plan and erosion control and stormwater management, and that'll all be handled on the front end with some sort of rough grading package.
Well, I certainly think it's, well, thank you for being here, first off. I certainly think it's really cool that this is going to be across the state line. You know, that's kind of our thing here in Bristol, and I think that's just a nifty selling point for it. So am I correct? I can't see it very well from here. So some of these are townhouses and some are actually apartments, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so that'd be like townhouses, condos, the vertical ones, and then you'll have the 3-story apartment buildings?
Yes.
And that's kind of like, I've seen this I know they do it in Johnson City, I've seen it in Newport News, I've seen it up near Cleveland. It's I guess what they call it, like, not based on the numbers, but on the design, like high-density urban apartment setting, is that what it is?
That's generally what, you know, we're shooting for. Again, this is all concept stuff, but the idea is to kind of diversify the different, you know, availabilities for units. Now, this I think shows a retail section up front that I don't believe is going to happen. It's not. We're not requesting any rezoning for retail in Tennessee, so I don't know that that'll happen. But generally, I think what they're trying to show here is just there's going to be a mix mash of different types of units.
The only question I had was, do we see any problems with anything mentioned earlier, like the location of the closest fire hydrant on the Virginia side on Island Road, or is that more for Bristol, Virginia Utilities to work on that if the project moves forward?
It is. It's something that they would have to, like I said, you know, BVU has said there aren't any utilities, especially sewer utilities, in that area. So there would have to be an extension from Bristol, Tennessee into Bristol, Virginia. So there would have to be a lot of coordination as far as the utilities go. That's probably going to be one of the more challenging aspects of the project.
Would that also include a hydrant somewhere along,
there would have
probably
to,
towards Island Road,
right,
that end?
Yeah, just based on whatever their standards are for how far apart hydrants would need to be for the amount of units that would be serving.
Do you know of any other places in Bristol, Virginia, maybe that weren't accessible by wastewater services from BBU that are served by Bristol, Tennessee? Is that something that happens with any regularity?
I believe that there are some, maybe not a larger scale development. There are some houses here and there that have been, but I don't know 100%. So, but I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Let's put it that way, given the way the cities are laid out.
Okay. All right. Well, again, we appreciate you being here to answer some of our questions tonight. And if there's no other further council discussion, we do have a motion from Mr. Osborne and a second from Mr. Hartley for approval of the amendment. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnham,
Yes. The next item is the approval of a short-term rental ordinance. We had one person who signed up for public comment for this item. That was Mr. Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Michael Pollard. I live at 140 Ashley Drive. I've been running into some times where I wanted to give my old address number. Anyway, in general, I like the idea of this ordinance. I was pushing for something along these lines when I was on the planning commission, but at that time, the majority didn't see any need for it. Seems like there hadn't been any complaints about how things were before. I prefer to be proactive. They didn't see that need. Now they're going forward with that recommendation. My only concern is that the ordinance as recommended includes both a permit for the short-term rental owners and also a business license. And I think that's overkill. And I would recommend that the business license requirement be dropped. These are homeowners. They're not business operators. They're trying to get some side income, and there's already a permit process that's required. They're already having to comply with inspections and a lot of other requirements. And I would be concerned that that business license probably is going to bring in with it a lot of other overhead that is not directly included in this ordinance. That would be handled by the Commissioner of Revenue's office. It's my understanding that the business license process itself requires additional paperwork filings, additional fees involved, and that could drive a lot of people who would otherwise be very interested in this, might drive them away from it. And some of them may decide that they want to keep doing it the way they're doing it, which is not the legal way of doing it. So I like simplifying whenever possible. I think this is a good idea in general. I would just recommend that the business license not be a requirement. Thank you.
That was the only person who signed up for public comment. Staff report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So you see is a draft ordinance to regulate short-term rentals in the city. And the definition here for the short-term rentals is for homes, for people to use them that are putting them on hosting platforms such as Airbnb, VRBO, any others that might be out there. This wouldn't have any regulation with hotels or motels. It also wouldn't have any, it also wouldn't regulate, say, private leases between somebody wanting to lease out their property for 6 months or a year or anything like that. So this is specifically just for short-term rentals. Our definition being for a period of fewer than 30 consecutive days. So as you remember, there was a public hearing 2 weeks ago where I kind of went through the what we're looking at asking for on an application process, and I'm just going to run through those again real quick. First of all, like I said, they would have to complete an application. The application would have all of the things in here that they would have to sign off on. We did set an annual fee for registration at $25 per property. The owner of the property would be the only one able to operate a short-term rental. They would not have to live at that address. However, they would have to be the property owner. Proof of ownership would be required. A business license was put into the ordinance from the Commissioner of Revenue's recommendation. Have to be proof of homeowners insurance with a minimum general liability coverage on the short-term rental. If their unit is part of a HOA, homeowners association, the operator must present proof that that is allowed per the bylaws of the homeowners association. We have had a couple of complaints about short-term rentals being run in townhouse and condo complexes that have an HOA. So, you know, they did, at least right now, have a way to take care of that through their process. Operators would be limited to a maximum of 10 rentals by right. Any more than 10 units, then they would have to apply for a special use permit. The reason the Planning Commission kind of wanted to look at this was they didn't want a large group or a group coming in and purchasing 40, 50, 60 apartments in one complex and then not being able to use them for the intent of housing, just using them all for these. So that was the main reason why we did put a limit on those. The minimum of 1 off-street parking space per rental unit. Occupancy would be capped at 2 people per bedroom, and you could only have 1 booking per dwelling allowed at the same time. So if you had a single-family home, you could do 1 booking. You could have as many people as, you know, if you have 3 bedrooms, you could have 6 people, but you could only book it to 1 group at a time. So you couldn't rent out 1 room to 1 booking and another room to another one, because then you're starting to look into bed and breakfast type territory. Smoke detectors, a fire extinguisher, and carbon monoxide detectors would be required. A safety inspection of the property would be performed by the city inspection office. Accessory structures shall not be used for short-term rentals unless they have been previously approved as accessory dwelling units. So you couldn't do it out of your garage, you couldn't do it out of a shed, unless that particular one had been approved as a residential unit prior. Could also not use recreational vehicles to house short-term rentals. There'd be no signage allowed on the site, no outside signage. Inside the unit, the name and telephone number of the operator shall be posted conspicuously within the short-term rental, and the owner would be responsible for addressing any problems associated with the rental. So part of the registration process, the operator would certify that the rental meets all the requirements of this section. The application shall also provide, as part of the registration, that the operator is agreeing to permit annual inspections of the rental at reasonable times and after notice has been presented to address complaints. We do have a short section in here as far as cancellation or suspension of a license, failure to collect or remit the lodging tax, or 3 or more substantiated complaints within a 3-month period. This complaint would need to be, as I said, substantiated, a police report, a call to building inspector's office about a problem, or a call to the community development office, and then we would investigate. It also has an appeal process for those that have had their cancellation or suspension. That pretty much sums.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Does anyone have any questions for Jay?
I do have a couple of questions. So just to be clear, and I think you did address it, so this is only for people who use VRBO or Airbnb or those type of online rental apps.
Right.
So this wouldn't be like if I were going to rent my house out for the weekend for the race
No.
or for Rhythm and Roots or something like that.
That's a little too far into it that we want to
Yeah.
get. That's the type of regulation you need. That's
Okay.
right.
I have another question about I know you said that there'd be a safety inspection, and I think the language of the ordinance that I read says it would happen, not frequently, but it would happen with some regularity, correct?
Right. They could happen as often as once a year.
Okay.
Annually.
So when you're going through some of these regulations, like 2 people per bedroom, how do you, is that the requirement that Airbnb sets, or is that just something that we would set?
That was something that the Planning Commission, they kind of came up with that number as far as that goes, that then you're not cramming so many people into one house that, you know, then you would have more opportunity to become a nuisance to the neighborhood.
So effectively, there's no real way to enforce that per se. It's just an honor system.
I mean, it is a certificate, you know, you do sign off on
Yeah.
it, and yes, that is correct.
But no, we're not gonna send police rolling up if you've got somebody sleeping in the living room floor or
No,
something?
no,
Okay.
I don't see how that would be possible.
So on the business license, am I correct that the cost of business license is based on the gross revenue?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, so I know that other localities that have ordinances for short-term rentals don't necessarily require a business license. Sometimes instead of a business license, they'll require a higher fee for like a special zoning or an application fee or something. I think Virginia Beach does like $500 or something.
Right.
So what was the process, what was the thinking process that went from maybe a higher fee than $25 to have a business license? How did y'all get to that?
That was basically in conversations I had with Commissioner of Revenue, that they believed that was the easiest way for them to be able to collect the lodging tax through a business, was through having a business license.
So would the proposal be, it's not, it's only spelled out in this ordinance, because this is just setting down the requirements and regulations for how it's run. It doesn't exactly specify that it would be the lodging tax, but that's what it would be most likely is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I believe there would have to be another ordinance passed as far as that. I might defer to that.
That's correct. We'd have to have another lodging tax ordinance.
But for sake of simplicity, it would be set at the same thing the lodging tax is.
That would be up to council.
Most likely, that would be the thought. Okay.
To follow up on the Vice Mayor's point, right now, so there's no lodging tax by ordinance, that'd be something we'd have to consider, but they would be expected to remit state sales tax.
You know, I think so, but I'd have to double check on that.
Okay.
And
then-
that would all be paid for not by the business owner, but by the,
Yeah, but the business
renter.
owner would collect it and
That's
remit
right.
it back to the Commissioner of Revenue, hence the rationale for a business license.
Correct.
You brought up a point, just not necessarily to this, but you're talking about 2 people per bedroom, and if you got any different, you started, but 2 people per bedroom, but 1 booking, and you get into the land of a B&B. Do we have anything that regulates or considers bed and breakfast
A
currently?
bed and breakfast, as far as the allowable use in a residential district, you have to apply for a special use permit for that. I don't know how those lodging taxes themselves are collected in a bed and breakfast.
I was just wondering if that's something that the planning commission might want to also go back and if there isn't anything currently, they
We
might
can
want to
definitely look
consider or discuss if they feel it's necessary.
Sure, yeah, we'll take a look.
Is it my understanding, is it correct that we can take action on this item tonight, but we don't necessarily have to, and we could discuss it more and take action at the next?
tonight's not an action item. Tonight is just a discussion item. We'll
Okay.
take action at the next meeting.
Okay.
I'll just add that I'm really surprised that we haven't had some type of regulations in place earlier, because we seem to have quite a few Airbnbs and rentals in this area. And as we move forward, as the casino comes, we're gonna have more and more come up. So I think as those short-term rentals continue to grow, we need to look at some regulations in place and put some in place.
And that was one of the driving forces with the future development. You know, we've had some complaints, and we tried to address them as best we can throughout our current ordinance, but we felt it was a good time to go ahead and get ahead of it before they start to come in at a larger clip than they are now.
Let
Yeah,
me- oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I know a lot of places, a lot of other localities already have these in place. And it would be interesting to see about the business license, how many do require the business license and charge the fee to be part of it. So I think that would be, I'd be interested to take a look at that.
Okay, yeah, we did do some comparisons with other localities or other ordinances in the Commonwealth, and I don't remember off the top of my head. There were some that did specify business licenses. There were some that labeled them more as home occupations. Then there were some that just labeled them basically business. So there's a wide variety of, there's a lot of flexibility in the Commonwealth to pretty much set your own ordinance as far as this goes. So I think that's why we see such a variety.
And this may be more for Mr. Reeves. Isn't there currently some bills in the General Assembly regarding these hosting platforms?
There is, and we'll probably know more about how that's going to play out over the next couple of months, based on what happens in committees.
Let me ask you a question. I know you said that you can't, for instance, say, here's my garage that's never been an Airbnb before, been an apartment before, but I'm going to rent my garage out. You can't do that. What about, I've seen that in bigger areas, there's been a propensity for people to have tiny homes and turn those into Airbnbs and VRBOs and stuff. Does this ordinance ordinance say anything about having tiny homes on your property and using them? Would you have to get them approved as an accessory dwelling unit first?
I guess it depends on whether or not the tiny home is considered the main structure on the property or not. If say you had a main residence and then you had another, like a tiny home on there that was an accessory dwelling unit, you would be able to use that, as long as it was classified as residential.
That was kind of where I was going,
Right.
I have a double lot, but I don't necessarily want to rent out half my lot. But say if I did, say if I put a tiny home there that's, they build them in like shipping containers and all this stuff.
Right.
So would that get approved? You'd have to approve that as an accessory dwelling unit.
And that
first.
depends on what zoning district you're in.
Yeah.
Some zoning districts, accessory dwelling units are allowed by right. But I believe the R1 and the R1A, that you have to have a special use permit. R2 and R3, I believe they're allowed by right. They just have to be constructed, to be able to meet the standards of residential housing.
Okay.
But this would also require a safety inspection.
Right, the inspections department, and I've spoken with Mike Johnston, our building official, would just go in at the time of after the application was submitted, just to basically just do a quick safety inspection. They wouldn't be pulling wires and things like that. It's just to make sure that everything that's supposed to be there is there and that they don't see any glaring problems.
Is one of the things that they look at, for example, that smoke detectors, and
Right.
things like that,
To make sure that the things that they're supposed to have in there are in there.
Yeah, because in your normal house, you don't necessarily, you're not required to have a smoke detector, but I think in this case, you might want to make sure people
Yes.
would have one, just like you do in a hotel or somewhere else.
I have one other question. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
So we're talking about having one off-street parking space. So what about when you get into downtown, like with these lofts that, I don't know if they all have an off-street parking place? Like,
The downtown, the code for parking downtown does not require any off-street parking except for the residential uses. And they are required to have 2 spaces per unit. Now, I don't know if all of them down there do. I don't have that information, but I would think that they would use whatever parking spaces that they would have for their apartment or their loft apartment.
so technically speaking, if there's a house somewhere, maybe not even downtown, but there's a house somewhere that just doesn't have a driveway necessarily, but they always just park on the street in front, it's technically the same.
And there could be some flexibility in certain cases like that, because we do know that there are some houses, especially in some of the older parts of town, that don't have driveways. So,
All right, well, thank you, Jay, for your
Well,
work
no,
on.
I've not started yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around all this. I'm gonna start with, when you was presenting it, you made the statement that 3 or more complaints within a 3-month period.
12-month period.
It's a 12-month.
Yes.
On page 29. okay? And, I like Mr. Hartley's comment about we might as well go ahead and take care of bed and breakfasts at the same time we take care of this. I like that. But anyway, my major concerns are when you read the definitions of what's being proposed, it's being presented as Airbnb and such. But if you read this, it truly applies to all hotels and motels under the description. So that verbiage has to be changed. I thought, did I read that right? And I read it again, and then I read it again, and then I read it again. And this does apply to any and all daily rental properties. With no exceptions. So that is something we have to fix. Because okay, I'm just going to stop there. We need to look at that. The definitions that is proposed here applies to any and all daily rentals with no exceptions. Okay, and I was going to ask you, where did the Planning Commission model this from? You said you've looked at several other localities. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because if they have to get a business license, and then they have to register, the homeowner they have to claim it as income on their income, so they're going to pay state, they're going to pay federal, they're going to pay lodging tax, they're going to pay a business license, they're going to pay a registration fee. And I understand we need a level playing field for everybody. Everybody needs a level playing field. You got to keep your motels and hotels open and not let everybody, rent their houses out, coming in for the casino and all of that. I understand that. But we really have to look at our verbiage on this and make sure that there's not any unintended consequences that we just didn't expect. But I'm telling you that this right here, the way it's presented, all motels, all hotels, everything is affected by this definition. So we need to really look at that.
And that'll be something that we definitely will do then. These definitions were taken from the state code as far as that goes. So I'll go back and take we'll go back and take a closer look as far as to make sure that we're not including anything except what's more under the short-term rental, so something that was suitable for a dwelling, and using it that way, and not making sure that we don't have hotels and motels in this at all. Because that was not the intent of the ordinance.
Okay, I understand that, and I understand that, okay. All right, and can you explain the $100,000 general liability?
Oh, the $1 million general liability?
The $1 million, I'm sorry.
Right, that just would protect the homeowner in case there was anything that happened at that, while there was somebody staying there. That $1 million policy is pretty much the standard policy that we see when we get certificates of liability insurance for the city, for special events and other events. That tends to be the amount that is used.
Okay, but you don't feel like that should be regulated through the homeowner and his insurance?
Well, that would be...
His insurance is going to require different things because he is, or she is now using that.
Right.
I don't want government to overstep.
I understand.
There's things that self-correct out there without government's intervention.
It would just...
the insurance between the homeowner and the insurance company should be between them. I don't think that the city should have any say-so in how much liability insurance
they have to carry.
Okay.
That's just my 2 cents. And going back to the two-person per bed, I would like to see that striked out. We have no way to police that. I raised 4 kids. I'm telling you, they don't get out of your bed until they're in middle school. So when you're going around, you're gonna have kids in your bed. So there's no way you can police that, so there's no reason why it should be in there. I would like to see that pulled out. I mean, that's the main big things that I'm concerned about. And as far as the 3 or more complaints within a 12-month period, the homeowner needs more than 15 days to dispute that, because people do go on vacation. It may happen in a time where Airbnb's in here, the place is rented, and it's the 3rd strike, and they're on vacation, they ain't getting mail, they don't have no idea that the letter's being sent, and then we got the snail mail sending it, and it may be sent out 15 days, and it comes day 14 in your mailbox.
That's fine. That might be something we can look at bumping up to, say, 30 days or something like that.
So, I mean, I understand we need to do something, we just need to do the best we can to have it, without too much government intrusion. We need a free market, we need to let the money flow as best we can. These people are renting these, coming in, people from out of town to sightsee, spend money, vacation, go to races, go to rhythm and roots, whatever, and we don't need to do anything that would stagnate people from coming in here. So I would really like to proceed with caution on this. I'd like to see us work on this with patience and see what the state is going to do. The bills have already been presented. The state, they're better equipped at that. I mean, I know we're a local locality and we can set our own provisions and everything, but we don't need to be writing the book on it. We can follow the lead from other people that's successful. And that's where I'm at on it.
All right, well, I think good discussion, good points, and we've got some work to do. And again, I do appreciate you and the work that the subcommittee on the Planning Commission did that worked with you on it. And
if it is the desire of the council, I can take this back to the Planning Commission and discuss some of these with them. It's not a requirement, but if you would prefer me do that as opposed to working on it as a staff level only, then, that's something we can do.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a suggestion maybe that, since it sounds like, we all have maybe different specific things that we're concerned about or interested with this ordinance, but some of them are differing opinions. Maybe we all take, 2 or 3 days and then just collectively send an email to you, and maybe you can forward our suggestions on to the city planner. Would that be okay?
yes, I think that'd be fine. And then if we need to go the route to address any proposed changes or thoughts or suggestions to the entire Planning Commission, we can go that route as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have another comment too. Is there a reason for a rush on this? Is there a reason why we can't take some time?
Oh, no. It's
and get all this verbiage right and get it laid out, the way that everybody's comfortable with it?
No, there's no reason why it has to be done tonight or it has to be done next month. It was just something that we went ahead and started.
Okay, can you, Mr. Osborne just talked about, sent for a couple of days sending text out, everything else. Can we not just send it back to planning, let them take our comments tonight, absorb it, and then them talk about it and work through it, and then bring back another proposal at a later date?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine. I'd be cool with that. I mean, I was just thinking maybe if we could all collectively get our thoughts together so they have them all laid out, maybe here's something that says, I want X, Y, and Z, you want A, B, and C, and they can say, let's put them all together, the next time they meet. Just that they have all of our stuff in a layout they can look at, you know.
And I would like to see the direction that the state is going in this before we act on it.
Mr. Eads, would that require another public hearing to your?
I just have to look at that timing.
Yeah.
I think if we change it extensively, we'd probably have to have another public hearing.
Okay.
I mean, I think putting our comments together would help the planning commission as they go through it. And y'all won't meet until, what, middle of February again?
February 22nd, 23rd, somewhere around there.
By then, we'll have a pretty good idea of which bills, by then they should be in crossover, so you'll know which bills, you know, not just introduced, but maybe stand a chance. So, by then, I think we'll know more and can move forward in a little clearer fashion. As long, you know, hopefully we don't have to re-advertise and do that, but if we do, we do. So.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Jay. And moving on to our next item on our agenda, presentation of the budget calendar for FY '23. Oh,
Gene, I'm
And I
getting a little bit
apologize.
younger in my,
there was one person that signed up for public comment for this item, and that's Mr. Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. As with some other items, my comment might be addressed by the staff presentation. My comment was simply that the schedule does not include any Saturday workshops, but I expect that that's probably addressed by getting started earlier and having more opportunities for evening workshops. But I wanted to be able to make that comment and, well, our only opportunity for comments in advance. I expect that's the Mr. Eads' intention to allow plenty of time for after-hours comments or workshops when there tends to be more people involved in the evening workshops than on the Saturday workshops. So it sounds like a good solution to me, but I didn't want to make any assumptions one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff report.
Council, before you is the budget calendar as we've proposed. Thank you, Gene. My eyes are not getting any older. As I get younger, it gets worse. And just for the record, yesterday was my 5 years as city attorney here, so in 5 years my life has aged me 10, but it's been an absolute pleasure. So this past November, we sent the budget work papers to departments, and those work papers were due back January 14th, along with outside agency applications they were due. The finance department takes 2 to 3 weeks to compile that data and put it into a format where myself and Ms. Spradlin and department heads can review that in an organized manner, and we will start those internal department management meetings in February, as we have always done in the past. We will continue to develop the budget in February and March of 2022. As proposed, the first budget workshop would be March 1st, and the second budget workshop would be March 3rd. And on March the 8th, we would also have outside agency presentations. This is the same calendar format that we have followed for the past 3 to 4 years now, as to when the timing of these certain budget workshops occur. And then I would present the budget on April the 7th, which is a Thursday night rather than a Tuesday night. The tax rate would be set on April the 12th of 2022. The budget advertisement would be in the paper on April the 17th. A public hearing on the appropriation ordinance would occur on April the 26th. The first reading of the budget ordinance would be May 10th, with a second reading of the budget ordinance on May 24th. As all these meetings would begin at 6 p.m. and public comment pertaining to the budget will be available at all regularly scheduled council meetings. The budget process, as we've gone through this in the past several years, this schedule seems to be very beneficial not only to departments but also to the city. It gives us a little bit of flexibility in the event there is an event that would occur sometime in the spring, like similar to COVID-19, where things were pushed back a little bit. So it does give us a month to get the budget passed. However, I would caution each of you all that ordinances do not take effect for 30 days unless it can be determined that's an emergency. So we do need to be cognizant of that fact so that we have a budget in place on July 1 of 2022. I do know that Ms. Nave has had some scheduling concerns on that March 1 and March 3rd date. I do believe she is available either the week before or the week after for those budget workshops, and that's something that Ms. Spradlin and I will probably have to look at to determine what would be the most beneficial for us and staff to be able to get those things ready and presented in time.
Okay. Are there any questions?
So, more than likely, the 2 workshops will change to accommodate Ms. Nave?
Yes, I think it's beneficial for all council members to be available during the budget workshops. As most of y'all know, as we've worked through the budgets in years past, I incorporate many of the things that you all discuss in budget workshops into my budget presentation in an attempt to get a consensus, knowing that we would at least have 3 people to pass the budget as it's presented on April the 7th. We know we may need to make some tweaks after April the 7th, and then at that time, after April 7th, council can ask for any other workshop that they deem necessary to make any changes to the budget that they feel needs to be made.
Yeah, it would be really helpful. I would appreciate it if we could look at that week of February 21st, anytime that week, but if we fall in line like we did the following week with the 1st and the 3rd, look at the 22nd and the 24th, or either March 8th and 10th.
Okay.
Ms. Spradlin and I just discussed, probably the best week for us would be the week of March 7th. In order to make sure we have everything prepared. We think pushing it back that previous week may be pushing us too quickly to get everything prepared.
Does having a regular meeting on the 8th, and the outside agencies, does that have any impact, or should we plan on not trying to pack too much into that council meeting, and just pick another night?
Not knowing what would be going on March 8th, if there's anything that could be moved, probably what I would do, I would push that off to the next meeting, to March 22nd, and potentially do one of the budget workshops on the night of March 8th. That may make for a long night, but we'll look at that to see. How about March 10th or 15th, Ms. Spradlin has suggested? That's fine.
I have a conflict on the 15th.
Okay.
That's why I was trying to.
We can do the 10th, potentially. Let us look at that, but we know March 1st and 3rd's out, and we also now know March 15th is out, or 10th. 15th.
Yeah, that first
So
part of that
we'll
week.
get some updated dates.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. The next item of our agenda is financial policies review. Nobody signed up for public comment for this item, so staff report.
Thank you. Mayor and members of council, the financial policies are presented for review tonight. The financial policies, this is one specific policy within several finance policies that form the framework of our department and city financial management. The policy states that it will be presented annually to council prior to January 31st for review and revision. This policy has been reviewed by the Finance Committee. That committee consists of Mayor Farnham, Vice Mayor Osborne, the city manager, myself, the treasurer, the commissioner of revenue, the school superintendent, and the school chief financial officer. This policy is presented with the recommendation of the Finance Committee. The purpose of this policy is to insulate the city from a fiscal crisis. It serves as the guide for decisions that have a significant fiscal impact. The policy promotes long-term financial stability. The policy directs attention to the total financial picture of the city. Its purpose is to ensure sound financial management and to protect the city's credit rating. The goal in the policy is AAA, which is the highest credit rating that an entity can achieve. Right now, as our financial advisors mentioned earlier, we are Moody's A3 and Standard & Poor's A+. So this is an aggressive goal, but the committee continues to believe that we ought to want the highest level of credit rating. Also, to limit the maximum overall legal and moral obligation debt that the city carries. This policy, it's written in the policy that it's to be presented annually to council by January 31st, so that that not only council but all stakeholders in the city are aware of the policy that governs our fiscal management. One change to this policy is on page 4. It is to correct a typo in section 2.02, changing citywide, which was listed as one word, to put a hyphen in there. That is the only change this year recommended to the policy. The revenue section of this policy addresses revenue collections to monitor that all taxes are collected timely and accurately. It states that a reassessment for all real property will occur every 4 years. Revenue forecasts are to be conservative yet accurate. Restricted revenues shall only be used for the intended purposes. The city will limit the use of one-time revenues to one-time expenditures, such as non-recurring items. And unless related to carryover funds, the use of unassigned fund balance should not be used to finance current operations without specific approval by council as a regular agenda item. The expenditure section of the policy states that one-time expenditures should be funded with an offsetting revenue item or from an adequately funded reserve. Ongoing expenditures will be monitored in comparison with appropriations. The city will seek to optimize the efficiency and effectiveness of all services, and department heads will be responsible for managing expenditures within the respective operating budget. And the city does have a separate budget policy which details the specifics of the budget process. The budget is listed in this policy for financial policy completeness. The city's budget will be balanced. Ongoing and stable revenues will be used to support ongoing operating costs. Monthly reports comparing actual revenues and expenditures to budget amounts will be prepared and distributed monthly to departments. And budget adjustments between line items may be authorized by the city manager, and council must approve all supplemental appropriations as well as transfers between departments. The capital improvement program section of the policy requires a five-year capital improvement plan, and the program consists of 2 components. The capital plan, which lists the locality, the items the locality anticipates needing within the next 5 years, and the capital budget, which the city manager will present annually to city council for approval. The debt section of the policy is the largest section of this policy and sets the guidelines for making financial decisions related to debt. The city does not intend to issue tax anticipation notes, but this section allows that if the timing of revenues requires the issuance of those notes, the notes may be issued as outlined in the respective budget ordinance. There are 2 debt ratios listed in the policy. Even though state law allows the issuance of GO debt up to 10% of assessed real property value, this policy restricts the city to 5% of assessed value for GO debt. The ceiling for debt as a percentage of operating expenditures within each fund is set in the policy at 8%. Compliance with these policies will be calculated each fiscal year and provided to council with the proposed budget. They'll be available to the public as well in the budget document, and for this year, they're listed in the fiscal year 22 budget book on page 13. The long-term debt policy describes when the city may use debt. It also lists the criteria for evaluating funding for capital improvements. The policy specifically states that under no circumstances is it recommended to issue long-term debt obligations for private enterprise projects where business plans and market risk play a significant role in the economic outcome of the project. That's listed here word for word as it was put into the policy when it was formulated, with the intent that that would be communicated to council at least annually. The last section of the policy is financial reporting. The section states that the city's financial statements will conform to generally accepted accounting principles as established by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, also known as GASB. The city will maintain an accounting system to allow for the accurate and timely preparation of financial statements. Audit results will be presented to council for approval or acceptance. The Finance Committee will regularly review the financial activity of the city and may report to council any areas of specific concern. Monthly financial statements will be distributed to City Council. Quarterly financial updates will be provided to the council as well. Compliance ratios will be presented, and at a minimum, that will consist of 2 years of actuals of audited data, the current year ratios, and the ratios in the proposed budget. Council, this concludes the presentation of the financial policies. The Finance Committee recommends that council approve these policies as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradlin. So we are looking for a motion to accept and approve the financial policies.
I move for approval of the financial policies as presented.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Is there any council discussion?
I'll just say very briefly, as a member of the Finance Committee, thank you for your work that you do to the CFO. You put a lot of work in every month, every year, every day, on our finances, and I think I speak for the mayor when I say it's fun to be on the committee. It's informative to be on the committee, and hopefully we're doing some good stuff on the committee. And thank you for this.
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing these forward. I remember when we first went through this process, and one of the key things was that it be brought before council annually to review and approve. And to the only change that you make to be a typo, that's pretty good. I think that means we've kind of got this to a good working place, but circumstances can change. We may change this going forward at some point going forward, but it's good for us to look at these, for you, the staff, and the committee to look at them, and other than be just a plan that sits on the shelf. These are actually working documents, and I don't think you mentioned, but there are other underlying policies like the travel policy and those kind of things that you're not required to bring back to council, but those didn't change either, because we've kind of got those down. But I think having those policies, they've worked well, and the fact that we review them is part of, while the folks from Davenport have already left, but I think they would tell you that that's part of what has helped our credit rating go up, that the rating agencies like to see that and know that we're continually monitoring and reviewing not just the financials, but the policies themselves. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I think this city has done a great job over the last 5 or 6 years with this financial policy and everything else, but I do have a major concern right now. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that you probably understand our financial policies better than anyone in the city. And we're looking at how are we going to finance the school. In your opinion, is there anything in our financial policy that is going to hinder us and tie our hands on financing this school?
I think it will depend upon the vehicle in which the financing, the vehicle the city uses for financing the new school. As Mr. Eads and Mr. Hartley and those who were involved in the actual writing of the policies years ago will remember, the intent was to we were so precariously close to our legal debt margin. The intent was to not issue any new debt until we had gotten in a healthier place, and to communicate not only geo debt, which we've talked about a lot tonight, but moral obligation debt as well. We have policy goals that we are above, and you know, I think the intent is that council would, before, as long as we're above our goals, that council would really weigh heavily any new debt issued against the intended purpose of that debt.
Okay, I understand that council needed to weigh everything out. But the bottom line is, this council's already approved a new school. We just gotta figure out how to finance it. And I need to know, if we was to pull $5 million out of our unassigned fund balance and pay it down towards the school and finance that for 30 years with the GO bonds and kept it in-house, is that in violation of our financial policy?
Would you say that again?
I need to know that if we was to pull $5 million out of our unassigned fund balance, where we have 7 point whatever million sitting there,
I'm going to present that shortly. Yes, sir. Go
okay.
ahead.
If we was to use $5 million of that funds and finance the balance through the GO bonds as cities normally do their financing, would we be in violation of our financial policies? We would be under our debt limit, and we have the money sitting there.
I'll tell you, I think in violation may be the wrong word. The policies don't prohibit council from taking that action, not in any way. But it's important to remember the policy goal of general obligation debt as a percentage of assessed value is at 5%. Well, when we wrote the policy, we were above that percentage. So,
And we're still above that
right.
now.
So if you issue more GO debt, you're just further above that percentage. So violation is maybe the wrong word. The intent when the policy was written, I believe, was not to issue any more GO debt till we felt like we were at a healthier level. So, but this policy does not violate anything. It does. It would increase how far above the policy goal that the city is. It would.
Well, we know it's gonna increase naturally because it's debt. We're taking on more debt.
Right.
But, so we would still be within our bounds.
Well, this is a policy. It's not an ordinance or a law, but
I understand that, but I don't wanna step too far outside of our policy. But the bottom line is, we have to figure out how we're gonna finance this school.
yes, sir.
Can I just ask for clarification? Right now, roughly, I think you all saw tonight, we have about $19 million in GO debt that's available to us. Are you saying that we would borrow roughly $18 million from the GO debt?
No,
Okay,
no. The proposal on the school is 22 million.
right,
The school has 2.4 million that they can contribute. I done the math on it at the last council meeting. I don't have that with me tonight, but I had it figured out to where we could pay roughly $5 million down of city funds and finance $14.6 million in GO debt,
which would leave us roughly about $5.5 million
which
in
would
of
still
debt.
leave us a buffer on our debt side. Yes.
And I'm just gonna say that is the 10%, that is the state, that is legally what we cannot go above. The policy sets the goal at 5%. The ceiling, the policy ceiling, goal is 5%. And here's the actual wording. Debt levels in excess of this ratio require a written action plan to be presented to council by the city manager annually that will address the excess debt and any new general obligation or moral obligation debt. So what that means, and council sees that almost quarterly, our debt plan that is presented when I do the quarterly financials is our plan. So this policy doesn't prohibit, doesn't violate. It says, what you're saying doesn't prohibit that, and this policy doesn't use the term violation. The intent is that the city work toward getting at a healthier debt level. And we said 5%, which Mr. Eads and I and the Finance Committee believe is a healthy level. But it says if we're above that, then we have to have a written action plan about how we're going to handle our debt. I think most of, I know Mr. Wingard, you remember when we didn't have any kind of debt plan, how we were going to get from here to here. So that's what this policy addresses. But the goal is 5%, and that's a healthy percent.
I understand that. We just have a major commitment from this council, and we've got to navigate through it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This policy does not keep you from doing that.
Okay, thank you.
But it
That's
does
what I
say-
wanted to hear.
It does not, but if you do that, then you've got to see regular data about how we get from here to where the city wants to be.
Okay. All right. Well, good discussion. If there's no any further questions or comments, we do have a motion and a second to accept the policies. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnham.
Yes. The next item is discussion of the unassigned fund balance. Staff report.
Thank you. Mayor and members of council will be discussing the unassigned fund balance and the amount that is over the policy amount. Here's the unassigned fund balance history for the general fund from the audited financial statements for each year for the past several years. 2016, you can see it was $7.3 million. 2017, $8.3 million. 2018, $14.1 million. 2019, $16.3 million. 2020, $17.4 million. And I'm pleased to report in 2021, $22,237,207. And clearly, you can see the progression in the unassigned fund balance that the city has made over the past few years. Hope you can see this. The unassigned fund balance per the fiscal year 21 audit, once again, was $22.2 million, or 34% at the policy calculation. And our policy calculation is 18% of budgeted revenues for the general fund and solid waste disposal fund, less the transfer. So you can see the budgets there minus the transfer from the general fund to solid waste. And then 18% of that is about $11.76 million. And the excess over the policy is $10,476,796. Then if we back off the Fund 7 capital carryover of $525,969, because historically council has left those monies in the capital fund to allow that build up there. Last fiscal year 21 carryover items of $629,448. Solid waste transfers from the beginning balance, also known as the unassigned fund balance this year, of $1.5 million. Then also less the school additional appropriation that council made in December 14th of $1 million. Those monies, we believe the school is committed to giving back to us, but if council's wanting to know what's available today, we have to reduce that balance to allow for that. So the amount above policy is $6,810,550. At the policy calculation, that is 28%. Here is the detail, council, of the fiscal year 21 carryover that was appropriated back in August of 21. Just if you wanted to see that, I had that available in case there were any questions about that. So options for council discussion, and these are listed based on what me and Mr. Eads have heard, discussed, or we're aware of. Leaving the unassigned fund balance. You can take no action. No action needs to be taken tonight. You don't have to take any action. This is really just for discussion. You can leave the excess in the unassigned fund balance. The fund balance policy addresses this and states it may be beneficial to the overall well-being of the city to leave that there. These funds could be used for additional solid waste disposal needs that we believe are coming. Mr. Eads mentioned a 24-month plan that should be developed in the next 30 days or so that should identify more of those. Jail transition costs. Joining the regional jail has not been finalized yet, but if that's finalized, there will be jail transition costs. These monies could be used to pay for some of those. Unknown capital item needs, and certainly other unknowns. And that is all the information I have, and this would be a time for council and or city manager discussion. Unless there are specific questions for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information. What questions do we have?
Okay, I would like to go back to the other slide. Right there. Okay, we're at our goal of 18%, and we are sitting here with $6.8 million unaccounted for. It's truly unaccounted for. Okay. 6.8. Now, if you go back to the other slide, go back one more. Right there. If you look at our growth rate of how we have been growing in this unassigned fund balance, it's phenomenal. If this trend holds, we're looking at a couple of $1 million annually if we keep our budgeting on the conservative side when we do our budget this fiscal year that we're fixing to start. So with that being said, you know, we went from 8 million to 14 million, from 14 to 16, from 16 to 17. Okay, that was a $1 million year. And then we go in COVID years from 17 to 22. That's phenomenal. So what I'm getting at, now could you go back to that one right there? If we would pull $5 million out of this unassigned fund balance towards the school and get that down to 1.8 million, plus that 525 up there in Fund 7 capital carryover could be brought back down into that 6.8, which is going to put you at 7.3. If my math is right in my head tonight, I'm getting tired. So that would put us back at $2.3 million after the 500 for the school, and we're growing at least an average of $1.5 to $1.8 million annually padding this. So it wouldn't be long before we've recovered a substantial amount of this 6.8 if you brought the 5 1/4 down 7.3. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see that? I just wanted to make point of that. Thank you.
You know, I'll echo some of Mr. Wingard's comments. It is a tremendous improvement. If you go forward back, I hate to keep making you go back and forth. If you go back to that slide, you know, when I came on council in 2018, it was 14 million, and you know, we've grown almost $10 million in the unassigned fund balance, you know, in that short amount of time, which is, you know, small part of it is the city council, but a big part of it is our CFO and our city managers, you know, fiscally conservative management of the city, you know, so thank you all. So to Mr. Wingard's point about the part of the unassigned fund balance that is unspoken for, you know, I agree that it would be, whether we do general obligation debt or whether we're able to use, I think the reason this is on the agenda is to talk about the school financing option that he had discussed, whether we do general obligation debt or, my preferred method of being able to work with the IDA as the funding mechanism. I think it'd be nice to be able to put some of that extra money down toward a school. Because if you buy a car, you don't want to finance it 100%. You want to put something down so you can decrease the payment. So I think it would be nice if we could do that. I do think that, as we have said multiple times tonight in previous meetings, we do have a lot of unknowns ahead of us. More so than I know you mentioned jail transition costs and stuff like that. We have a general idea basically of what the jail stuff is going to cost, but we don't really know what's the cost is going to be at the landfill. And I think we have to be very, very cautious with what we do with extra money, because you never know when we're going to need it up there, obviously. But yeah, if there's a way to put down, I don't know if it's $5 million or it's $4 million or whatever, or $3 million, whatever. If we can put down some money toward the school, I think that would be beneficial. It would certainly decrease our payment.
Well, I'm typically not one that counts the chickens before the eggs hatch, but we are making good progress of getting that casino open. And that's going to come online this year. So there is excess revenue that is truly going to come. This, it's coming. So I just wanted to make that point.
I know there's you don't have to go to it, the slide with the options about not necessarily do anything with it, other expenses coming up, landfill expenses, other capital needs. I'm torn because I think about what else is out there. Mr. Eads, what are your thoughts?
Well, council, some of y'all may fundamentally disagree with what I'm getting ready to say. I go back to when I was practicing law. Clients would come in and expect me to give them good news. And then when you don't give them good news, they would get upset with you. But my job as an attorney was to give them the worst possible scenario that they could potentially face, and do everything that you can to make sure that you don't ever face that worst possible scenario. And I can sit here and say I feel like I did that for 100% of my clients. My job now as a city manager, and I kind of wear dual hats. My job as a city manager and as a city attorney is to make sure that you all have the information available that's going to allow you all to make the best decision possible for the future of the city. If we can go back to that slide one more time that shows there we go, the other one, right there. Our fund policy says we should keep 18% of our budget revenues in the unassigned fund balance, which is $11.7 million. And then, so that put us at about $10.5 million above our policy limit. Of course, we need to take some things out, and one of the things that I think each of y'all need to consider when we take these out, or at least two of the items, is the solid waste disposal transfers from beginning balance. So in just this fiscal year alone, we have taken $1.5 million from beginning balance to cover issues associated with the landfill. That's from July 1. We're 6 months out, 7 months now. And if we've done that in 7 months, what's to say 14 months from July 1 of last year, we're not at 3 million? Or 21 months from July 1 of 2021, we're not at 4.5 million. That 6.8 million you have sitting there before you right now can go very, very quickly. One item that's not on there because none of the money has been spent yet or allocated is the jail. We know that there is going to be a transition period that's going to cost the city more than what we currently allocate to the jail. Worst case scenario, I hope, is roughly $2.5 million. Could be less. I anticipate it being less, but back to what my job is to advise you all of what could potentially happen. So let's say between now and June 30th, we spend another $1.5 million of general fund money on the landfill that was not budgeted. All of a sudden, your 6.8 has now dropped down to 5.3. Then we also know we've got $2.5 million that's going to go to the jail. So 5.3 minus 2.5 is, oh Lord, 3.8. And then let's say between July 1 of 2022 and December 30th, or January 25th of 2023, we've spent another $1.5 million. Now we're down to 2.3 million that's out of that above the policy limit. Pretty quickly, we can get down to that 11.7 million and be in violation of the policy limit that we set. And if some of you all were on council at this time, but at the time when this policy was being set, the goal was to make sure that we would never have to borrow from the TAN again. When we get to 11.7 million, we're close to have to borrow from that TAN again. And borrowing from the TAN required us, well, it allowed us to pay employees. It allowed us to pay operational expenses. And I'll just tell you, there would be nothing more embarrassing for this city than what we've done over the past 4 to 5 years to get this city in the position that we're in now, than us have to go back to our local bank and say we need a tax anticipation note simply to pay operational expenses. And I think that would be a tremendous disservice to taxpayers if we ever got to that point in the future. I think we need to be very careful about the cash that we have right now due to the landfill. I mean, and that's it. If it wasn't for this landfill, I might have a different position on this. But I can tell you right now, based on conversations I've had, having federal or state monetary assistance for this landfill is probably unlikely. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but as of right now, we don't know. And to assume that that's going to happen, I think is a grave error in judgment. To assume that the casino brings the revenue that we anticipate is a grave error in judgment. We need to make decisions based on what we know right now, not on what we anticipate or what we hope. And I know Mr. Wingard and Mr. Osborne have made comments about taking cash and putting it down. At this point in this city's precarious situation with the landfill, I would advise against it.
Go back to the other slide. Make you go back and forth. So that 7 million, I wish you'd have went back 3 years before that, because I can remember those times. And I'd say it was even way less than that when we were on the TAN. And, you know, it's built up, and part of it, you know, quicker than we thought. I agree. I mean, you know, I don't think we thought we would be off the TAN as quick and build this up as quick. So that's, as Vice Mayor said, I mean, that's really a tribute to the city management. Council played a role, but y'all have done a great job managing the expenses. You know, right now, I would agree, cash is king. There's a lot of unknowns. And when you think of the landfill and you can go forward now to the next slide. You mentioned the 1.5 million, and I was telling somebody, you know, if this had happened 6 years ago, I really don't know what we would have done, because we had virtually no borrowing capacity. We had no unassigned fund balance and was using a TAN to the tune of $7 million every 6 months. So the fact that we can even appropriate $1.5 million for the landfill is a testament to the buffer we have made. I mean, we can do that and not really, yes, that's a lot of money, but we're not like, adding to our debt, getting us close to the tan. We have a buffer. We've already set aside some money in a buffer, 2 buffers. One, 1.4 million, I think is what you, as a reserve, rainy day, emergency, we call it different things, that requires a supermajority to pull that money out. And I think the goal when we set that up was to get to 5 million. So not only would you have your 18% for your basically for operations to keep off the tan, then you would have that. We also set up a debt reserve, and I think we put 3.6 million in that. A little over 3, okay. So it's over 3 million, but as you'll present when you do the financial quarterly report and always show us the debt plan, we're gonna start getting into that here pretty soon. We still haven't quite got over the hump of when we peak in, 2027, I think, with the debt. So there's 2 other things that haven't been brought up where this money could go as well. I would, if it's feasible, yeah, it would be great to put some money down for the school. I don't know that, with everything else, that would be the best use of our money. And, when I look at it, I still think, I think we do at some point, and I know this is a discussion, need to move it out of unassigned fund balance and assign it to something. Even if it's assigning it to a reserve, that would still take just a majority action of council to move it out of the reserve and then appropriate it somewhere. Because if we don't, and we haven't for I think the last 2 years, that number keeps growing and growing and growing, and people look at our balance sheet and say, wow, they got a lot of money there. But if you assign it to something and say, no, we're holding this back as a reserve, so when an emergency comes up, when something unexpected comes up, we can tap into that without going back to the TAN, without going back to GO debt. That puts us in a good spot. It gives us that buffer, which, like I say, is probably a long way of saying that we've worked hard to get that, and, cash is king. Regarding the school, I think probably while a down payment would be nice, finding a financing mechanism that's the least expensive would probably save us money over time as well, and could equally work out. So hopefully we will, as different options are explored, that could have a benefit as well. So.
And council, I'd also add, I haven't discussed this with Ms. Spradlin, but I think she would be agreeable, and if she's not, she's more than welcome to speak up. But there's nothing that would prevent us years down the road, as we navigate the landfill issue and hopefully continue to grow our unassigned fund balance, to take a significant amount of cash at some point down the road, 5 or 10 years, whenever those bonds would be callable, and pay down on some of the principal at that time. And I think it would just put us in a better financial footing, at least in the short term, and allow us an opportunity to navigate these rough waters that we're facing right now with the landfill.
Yeah. Well, and even if those bonds aren't callable, you could defease them. You could set the money aside, and and for all intents and purposes, pay it off, set it, defease it. So, yeah, if we start seeing increased revenues or run into a windfall, or realize that something isn't quite as costly as maybe we thought, then those are options. So. But I do understand the point of wanting to make a down payment, and I think, if it's feasible, we can. I think 5 million probably isn't, and in that regard, in a way, the school is, because of their ESSER funds, are putting down a down payment really of $2 million towards this. And I'll make one more comment that when I looked at this originally, that's not in here is, and people may say, well, what about the ARPA money, the federal money? And that's not included because it has been assigned to a fund even though it hasn't been appropriated.
Right, that is not in the unassigned fund balance as of 6/30/2021.
Okay, I understand everybody's comments, and I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Eads, but your whole scenario there was based on zero growth, as if no more money's coming in. And that's not a reality, unless we do go to war with Russia. So I anticipate, all indicators are the city is still growing. We're financially, for the first time in decades, moving in the right direction. So I anticipate that unassigned fund balance to keep growing by a couple of $1 million a year. And by pulling out the $5 million from the school, saves us $400,000 a year in annual payments instead of giving the school system an additional $1.2 million. It's now around $800,000. So there's savings there. Cash is king. But still, the balancing of what's coming in and what's going out is critical. Anytime you can pay down to keep a lower payment, it's always better instead of financing everything to the max. So your scenario was you're sitting there draining this fund balance dry with no revenues coming in to replenish it, with no savings on the school system on the payment side of it, and that's not an accurate scenario.
Well, I'll just say, and I've thought a lot about this over the last year since we went through the referendum and had different people talking about the casino. The issue there is, you're right. I mean, I think starting, in the next budget year, we'll see new revenues. And that unassigned fund balance, I would say, will grow. And the reason it'll grow is because we can't anticipate those revenues probably for at least 3 to 4 years. I mean, right now, the first year they're open, it'll be a temporary casino. And it'll take a year or two before they get to the permanent, fully built out thing. And even then, how much of it, anytime something opens, they have a good, maybe first year. So does it drop off a little in the second year? Does it keep going up? Before you start budgeting that and putting it in for recurring expenses, it'll take at least 2 or 3 years to get a good handle on how much of that are you willing to commit, especially for a recurring expense. So yeah, in the interim, you probably will see your unassigned fund balance go up. But again, we've got things that we don't know what it's going to cost, and if it doesn't cost as much as we hope, then we can take that and pay towards or set aside for paying the debt. So, I understand your point, but it just, to me right now, there's a lot of unknowns, and draining that will put us back to where we could easily tip back over to where we were when I first got on council almost 8 years ago now. It wouldn't take much to push us back that way.
Part of me thinks, and I may be wrong, but the reason our unassigned fund balance has grown so much is because our budget has been very slim. And maybe in the future there will be more revenue coming in, but I think we're also going to have more expenses that we talk about the big stuff, the landfill, the school, the jail, but as we build back in things into the budget, like stuff that departments need, like stuff the IT department needs, and just more staff, like more police officers and paying everyone, I think we'll have more revenue, but we may also have more expenses that we don't quite know what that amount would be. So the unassigned fund balance could grow, but with those other expenses, maybe not as quickly as we have been used to. I don't know.
Well, I'd hate to finance 100% of the school and sit here in a year from now be looking at that unassigned fund balance instead of it being $6.8 million. It's sitting there at 11.7, matching our 18%, because we're going to grow. we're
Well,
gonna grow.
And the good thing if that does happen is you
If it
can,
does happen, we still financed 100% of the school because this school is on the table now.
well, and I would say that we're not financing 100% of the school. I'd say at the moment, we're financing about 90%. I mean, if the school's 22 million and the school system's putting down 2.2 million, that's 10% of the cost. So I would say that it's not 100% financing at this point.
Is it right to say, though, with the original PPEA model that the school systems talked about for a while, that was sort of a set payment and we couldn't really make any extra payments or pay it off early? But maybe with like using the IDA as a conduit, that could possibly be done in the future.
I think there's different mechanisms that we can look forward to in the future that would potentially reduce the payment either on a yearly basis through a refi or we could pay things off earlier, as Mr. Harley suggested. We could defease it through, just putting that money aside for that school.
Well, a lot of options that we're talking about, and I appreciate the discussion. So, for the sake of moving through the agenda, the next item, if there's no further discussion, the next item of our agenda is public hearing regarding an ordinance to vacate all of a certain public right-of-way in the city of Bristol, Virginia. I hereby open the hearing. Nobody signed up for public comments. Staff report.
Council, tonight is a public hearing to vacate a portion of an open and improved public right-of-way. It's Ordinance 22-1. Code Section 15.2-2006 requires that the vacating of a public right-of-way requires the advertising of such request in a public hearing. The City Council shall then consider the request to vacate the right-of-way by ordinance. Attached, you will find an ordinance to vacate a public right-of-way along with a drawing of its location. This request is being made by Mr. Steve Hutchins, Crown Legacy Investments, LLC, who are prospective buyers of the adjoining property. The City of Bristol, Virginia owns all adjoining properties to the east and west of this segment of Mount Vernon Drive. This request has followed the procedure to vacate the right-of-way. A petition has been filed and the public hearing was advertised on January the 10th and January 17th of 2022. The request has been circulated to other departments and Bristol, Virginia Utilities. Bristol, Virginia Utilities requires a deeded utility easement to maintain access to the utilities within the existing right-of-way to be vacated. Attached are copies of the petition, declaration of understanding, and a drawing and showing of the location of the request, and a copy of the ordinance for the first reading.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If there's no questions, I'll close the hearing. And the next item of our agenda is an ordinance to vacate a portion of an open/improved public right-of-way, Ordinance 22-1. Nobody signed up for public comment for this item. Staff report.
Council, I'll just reiterate exactly what I said just a moment ago in regards to the public hearing, and I would add nothing further.
Okay. So we're looking for a motion to have the first reading of the ordinance.
I move for first reading of the ordinance by caption only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there council discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum.
Yes. Reading of the ordinance by caption only.
Ordinance 22-1, ordinance to vacate a portion of an open/improved public right-of-way.
The next item is our consent agenda. What's the pleasure of the council?
Move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum.
Yes. The next item is a closed session. Pursuant to Section 2.2-3711.A1 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the public body, personnel, And pursuant to Section 2.2-3711.A5, Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the businesses or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community, unannounced business prospect. And pursuant to Section 2.2-3711.A7, Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. Legal matter. What's the pleasure of the council?
And council, just to clarify, the legal matters would be in regards to potential litigation with Bristol, Tennessee, and ongoing litigation with Bristol, Virginia Utilities.
I move that we enter into closed session for the reasons stated.
Second.
A motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum.
Yes. Vote. Council members certify that only business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as specified in the motion to convene in executive session were discussed. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I have a motion to make. I make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the city manager in regard to a specific personnel matter discussed.
I will second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum.
Yes. That's the last item of our agenda. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned.